Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm actually going to be reacting to a podcast. This is something new. We've never done this before, and I don't do this for every podcast, but this podcast in particular, we have found and we want to share it with you guys. It's called the Manufacturing Executive Podcast. And in this particular episode, I'm not going to react to all the episodes, but this one is particularly good because the information inside of it is extremely valuable. I've listened to it before and I want to share it with you guys because it not only resonates and echoes with our message, but there's also like some additional context that I want to provide for you guys. So without any further ado, let's jump into this reacting to Manufacturing Executive Podcast, and I'll share with you guys what the podcast is all about right here.
The Manufacturing Executive is a podcast that we created for leaders of manufacturing organizations. The goal for this podcast is to put a spotlight on people in the manufacturing world whose insights and experiences and stories can help you as a manufacturing leader grow your business. I'm Joe Sullivan. I'm a co-founder of the industrial marketing agency Gorilla76, and I'm also the host of the Manufacturing Executive Podcast. So the podcast is really about growth for manufacturers and from a variety of different angles. I've been co-leading this agency for 14 years, a majority of which we've focused on working with industrial sector B2B companies and particularly mid-sized manufacturers. So we have talked to hundreds upon hundreds of companies over the years, heard their stories, seen the issues they face. So trying to harness all that and be a resource to manufacturers.
That's awesome.
Manufacturing Executive Podcast is valuable because it puts a spotlight on real people in the manufacturing space. It lets them tell their stories and share their experiences in a way that will help you figure out how to address those same issues and grow your own business.
All right. Thank you, Joe Sullivan, for creating this podcast and allowing me to react to it. So the episode I want to react to is Human Input in a Data-Driven World with Martin Cloake. And
first, you need to work on.
So the reason why I want to do this is because if you guys have been living under a rock, you guys, might not know that Martin Cloake is the CEO and founder of Raven.AI. They are a manufacturing performance analytics company. They do manufacturing efficiency for production lines, helping them, do more with less, right? So, but they are also the host of Martin's one of the co-hosts of the Industry 4.0 Clubhouse, which has been gaining a lot of virality and traction lately. So I wanted to, put the spotlight on this particular episode. And make sure you guys go over to Joe's podcast. I'm going to link it down below this episode. Send him some love from the Industry 4.0 community Discord and from our YouTube channel. Let him know you came from us and, leave a review if you like this episode. All right, let's dive into the episode.
First, you need to work on your continuous improvement culture, and this needs to happen before even thinking about investing in technology. Continuous improvement, once it's baked into our culture, then view technology as a tool in the toolkit, and every manufacturer should be looking for the right tool for the job.
Welcome to another episode of the Manufacturing Executive Podcast. I'm Joe Sullivan, your host and a co-founder of the industrial marketing agency Gorilla76. So let me kick things off today by asking you this. Does technology have to be all or nothing? Do we have to either be on the Industry 4.0 bandwagon or off of it?
It's not a bandwagon, first of all.
And is it possible that in this increasingly data-driven manufacturing environment, we're losing sight of the value provided by human input? Today's guest
That may be true. Humans are definitely part of the Industry 4.0 revolution.
has drawn on his career experiences to build a solution that tackles this issue head on. Martin Cloake is the CEO and co-founder of Raven.AI. Raven.AI's platform delivers increased profits and 10x plus ROI to top global manufacturers by guiding actions with real-time insights. Martin is an experienced executive, an award-winning technology and entrepreneur with a background in manufacturing, data science, IP, and operations management. Martin holds multiple patents and is a mechanical engineering and business graduate from McGill University in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Martin, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Martin, you've got a great story about how your software, Raven.AI, came to be, and in particular, how your experience in sales earlier in your career at Blinds to Go influenced your decision to build this company. So I was hoping you could kind of start out by explaining what Raven.AI is in the first place for listeners, and also to tell us a little bit about the journey that influenced your decision to create it.
Absolutely. So, at a high level, we help manufacturers produce more efficiently. I mean, I can get into some of the details here, but, fundamentally, if manufacturers can understand what's happening, what has happened, it's much easier to take actions to improve performance in the future. So, we help manufacturers make sure they know exactly what's happening at their plants, and then we also help them take action. So, at the core, it's not that complicated, but, it was very much influenced by my early experiences working both in tech and in manufacturing.
No, that's great. I want to quote something you said in an article that you published late last year on LinkedIn. So you said, getting excited about manufacturers being data rich is like going on and on about how much paint Pablo Picasso had in his studio. Our obsession with data is making us forget who and what actually provides value.
That's very well said. I love that quote, and it's true. Data is nothing without context and turning it into information for your people to make decisions, making it available to unlock potential on the plant floor.
I think this was a really interesting and powerful statement. I'm just wondering if you could unpack that for us a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe what I can do is I can kind of frame it within my experience that caused me to found Raven. You alluded to the fact that I started off my career at Blinds to Go. So,
yeah,
my background is in high tech. I am at the core a high tech, engineer and entrepreneur. And, I graduated from McGill University in the early 2000s, and tech and telecom had actually, there wasn't as much activity in telecom, and I was recruited by Blinds to Go, which is kind of not what I had expected to go into, but it was a pretty neat offering. And Blinds to Go, I'm not sure what part of the country are you in?
I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. So
okay, so I'm not sure if Blinds to Go was actually all the way out to St. Louis, but it's an East Coast manufacturer with 100 plants, and really innovative way to look at manufacturing kind of holistically. And one of the first things that I did when I went to work at Blinds to Go is they got me to sell blinds in a blind store, which was a really, somewhat shocking, but kind of ingenious way to connect people to the reality of what it is to work in manufacturing. So, here I am, graduate from McGill University, full of confidence, which, I think that's what they give you when you go to McGill, thinking that I know how the world works, being sent to a blind store in Totowa, New Jersey. And the idea is you work in a blind store until you get good at it. And once you get good at it, then you get to come back and work in the plants. So I just remember, calling my wife within the first couple of days there and saying, like, what's going on here? I'm an engineer and I'm selling blinds at a retail blind store. So anyway.
That's pretty funny. I think that's really cool. It's important to be able to be familiar with the product before you actually innovate with that product.
As it started to go, and I started to realize, a couple of interesting things. First off, from a sales perspective, if somebody walks into a blind store, they're there to buy blinds, right? So you should be able to then, work with them and get them to, buy a blind, which I realized pretty quickly. But the second thing was to really understand, what is the impact on your customers if there's a quality problem. It's at some point in manufacturing, we see quality problems as a number, but I remember those cases where I mismeasured a blind and it came back to the customer and they say, you screwed it up. And really as on the retail side to live that firsthand experience of what, the user experience of manufacturing, it changes how you perceive those numbers. If something's late and your customer is asking for this. So that was really an interesting experience to sort of show me what the consumer side of manufacturing was. And I had never worked in retail sales. I'd worked tutoring math. So then after that, I went to work in the plants and I did all sorts of roles in the plants, from quality engineer to product engineer. And one of the first roles I had was as a production supervisor of a couple lines. And again, full of that McGill confidence, I thought I knew what manufacturing was. I'm going to get my Excel file and I'm going to optimize the process. And it's going to be, I had this one particular Excel file.
This is a really good story. I love this story.
That I really liked. It was an awesome file. I think it was about 6 or 7 megs, which at the time opened quite slowly, but it had all these neat, it was a pretty neat file. And I was also playing with data from Cognos, which is interesting because, one of my main advisors was one of the key people at Cognos before acquisition here. So anyways, I had all this data and I was seeing all these things. And at some point I went to my plant manager and I said, hey, can you look at my Excel file? I think I'd like to show you. And he says, Martin, he says, yes. Do you know the names of all 200 operators at the plant? And I said, no. And he said, well, I want you to memorize the names of all 200 people in your plant. And then once you've done that, you can come back and I'll look at your file. And I'm like, what? Okay. So anyways, I was still at the stage where, I begrudgingly listened to him. And then I started, spending more time on the shop floor and then realized that just by walking around,
Innovation happens on the shop floor, doesn't happen on the top floor. So Martin's boss was smart in this action to cause him to do that, and you'll learn why as he shares in a second.
It was clear where the problems were. Somebody would ask me for help with a certain machine, or they would ask for help or something. And I just see stuff as like a natural problem solver. And then what I realized is that the way to drive improvement in my lines wasn't with my Excel file, was by walking around, asking questions, looking at the process. And so my day morphed from a day that was more focused on analysis in Excel, where I was basically walking laps around the plant. So my morning would start, I'd get there at 10 to 7, and I'd meet with some of my team leads. And then I'd go and say good morning to all my operators. And they say, oh, good morning, Mr. Martin, because I was in Montreal. So, Mr. Martin was my name. And, I would notice something, I would thank them for coming in, and they'd ask me to do things. So then I'd walk around, and at some point I had close to 50 operators at the plant. And, it'd take quite a while. It'd almost take me to...
All right, sorry, I had to take a call there. All right, back to the...
I'd go to break with them. And then after break, I'd maybe go sit down to my desk because I absolutely had, some duties to do there. But this method of just walking around, and right now, apparently, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's called management by walking around. There's actually an acronym, and if you can see it on Wikipedia. So sort of my perception of manufacturing was completely different going into it, after working it firsthand. But one of the things that I was frustrated with was the fact that I moved completely away from the data. So I moved from data centric to people centric, and I didn't do anything with the data. But I was able to drive, improvement in my lines just by being there and solving these problems. So yeah, I'm not going to go on a 10-minute monologue here, but that was kind of, setting the stage for, the reason why I founded Raven. My perception of manufacturing before getting to the shop floor and after getting to the shop floor completely different. So, here, after working there for a few years, I kind of got a sense for what it took to provide value to my operators. To, I think the way that my, I perceived it is, if I can basically, as a supervisor at the time, it's my job to solve problems for my operators. What my operators are doing is pretty clear: keep the machines running, and I need to
Your job is to empower your operators to solve the problems themselves, not necessarily be the only one that can solve it. But I think that's kind of a nuance.
Walk around, find those problems and fix it. In some ways, the success of any business is not related to whether or not you have problems. It's related to how well and how quickly you solve those problems. So anyways, so that was really my time in manufacturing, which is super exciting. And I, as a competitive athlete,
this really sets the stage because, Martin's Excel spreadsheet, he realized that only he could view that. Only one person could view it at the time. And he realized that innovation and problems get solved on the plant floor. So he's trying to figure out how can he, unlock that data and information inside the spreadsheet and use it to empower the operators to make decisions on the plant floor.
I almost got some of that same feeling on a shop floor when things are rolling. It really feels cool to be part of a team and to be successful. So anyways, after leaving, I followed my wife to Ottawa when she was doing her PhD and I tried commuting to Montreal from Ottawa, which is a 2-hour drive, 3 hours with traffic. And I did that for about 3 weeks. And then I said, you know what, this is, so then I basically, I put up my shingle and started a consultancy, which combined my background in high tech and manufacturing and started consulting for this little startup scene in Ottawa. So this was 2007. So I got connected to a guy named Paul Lem, who's the CEO of Spartan Bioscience. And you should check them in the news here. They have real-time DNA testing for COVID testing. So I consulted and I did some, design work for Spartan Bioscience. And then there's a small company in town at the time with 10 people called Shopify. And we started hanging out at Shopify's office, and Shopify was doing some pretty cool things. And slowly this group, and we called ourselves, I think, Young Entrepreneur Club at the time, and now it's Fresh Founders. And slowly this club started doing some pretty cool stuff. So then Shopify started blowing up, and then Paul's company, Spartan Bioscience, started, doing really cool stuff. And then somebody sold his company. One of my other friends sold his companies to SurveyMonkey, and things started going more and more. And this little small group of us entrepreneurs in Ottawa began to sort of, do some pretty amazing things. And I'm running my consultancy and serving them. Did some work at Get Around, a company in Silicon Valley, and with another one of the people in the club. And then there's a point at which they kicked me out of the club. So
that's really sad.
They kind of presented to me that, the lowest form of entrepreneurship is being a consultant. So here I am hanging out in this entrepreneurship club, not really, I guess I'm an entrepreneur as a consultant. And they say, well, you're not sort of the caliber of entrepreneur that we're looking for in this club. And I'm like, really? So anyways, and I'm still consulting for them. And then at some point I started getting frustrated going like, yeah, I think, being a consultant is not really what I want to do. I think I want to start something. And I happen to have this problem that I'm really passionate about solving, which is, why don't manufacturers use data in the way that I think they should use data? So
I think it's very important to remember that statement. Why don't manufacturers use data in the way that Martin thinks they should use data?
So first things first, I go to my buddy Paul and I say, hey, Paul, I'm thinking of starting this company in, I think I called it IIoT.
But it's also really important to note, if you're going to start something you're damn passionate about solving. And I think that's why it was a smart idea to start Raven for Martin.
For manufacturing at the time. And I said, Paul, do you think I should do it? And he's like, no, don't do it. You're a great consultant. Stick to what you're good at. You wouldn't be good at being an entrepreneur. And it's like, So I most of the time I listened to Paul, but in this case here, I chose not to listen to him. And so then I started up what I called machine telemetry at the time. And really the idea was, how can you allow for manufacturers to use their data in a way that doesn't take out what's most special about being a leader in manufacturing? And what's most special is the time that you are working with your team to identify and solve problems. Any time that's not spent doing those things, I feel is time not well spent. And my frustration back then at how much, leader time is spent filling spreadsheets, reporting out data is just mind-numbing. And, there had to be a better way. And I would say even today, way too much time is consumed by technology rather than unlocked with technology.
Very true, because the way that manufacturers are trying to implement this technology is they're going with the solution-centric approach, which means they buy an off-the-shelf product like an Aviva system platform, like a Rockwell Connected Enterprise, and they expect to be able to buy a product that is digital transformation. That's not the case. To Martin's point, continuous improvement is one of the key elements of digital transformation, but it's more so being able to have a technology stack that all of your people, your machines, and your technology, your software all connect into to be able to exchange data information freely.
So I founded the company at the time. As an engineer, I'd always heard that you're supposed to name your company exactly what you do. So I called it Machine Telemetry because we're taking telemetry from the machines at the time. And then I met up with my co-founder, Braden, PhD from Institute for Aerospace Studies, University of Toronto, which is basically, I always say it's the rocket science program in Canada. It's the top. So I always say that, and Braden is the rocket scientist, and his eyes glaze over when he sees that. So yeah, and the idea here is that, how do we combine the best of technology with actual experience running operations? And that's kind of been the formula for what we've built to date. So we found it. We start to do some work for manufacturers, and I say, hey, Paul, because I'd always go back to Paul, my buddy from Spartan Bioscience, check it out. And he says, oh, that's pretty cool. You should raise some money. He says, oh yeah, let's do it. And but your company name sucks. I said, yeah, Machine Telemetry is the worst name ever. You should name the company Raven. And I said, why, Paul? and he was telling me with regards to the company name, like nobody's ever going to want to say, hey, the guys from Machine Telemetry are here.
That sounds so nerdy. I do agree that Raven.AI is a really sick name, Martin.
So he said Raven because Odin, the Norse god, has these two ravens, Hugin and Mun, and they fly around the world getting information for him, which is kind of what you do. And I said, boom, let's do it. So we changed the company name, reached out to some of my buddies who are, now quite successful in Ottawa. And they're like, this is really cool. And that kind of started, we raised some money, and we've raised a bunch of money since from effectively this network that we've had from the start in Ottawa, that's now basically given back and supported our community. So anyway, so I think, as mentioned, so we raised some money, and really the formula that we've had for building the business to date is really by combining the best that modern tech has to offer with a deep understanding of manufacturing, and we've built that to date. So for example, on our executive team now, we have Rob Lander, who was president and CEO of Stackpole International, billion-dollar publicly traded auto parts manufacturer, who spent his career transforming manufacturing operations. So for us, it's really important to have that, the core understanding of what it takes to transform manufacturing. Because in some ways, the people aspect of, change management is the same. People are the same. Technology has advanced, but we haven't. And really, that's been the formula for, what we've done so far. And now, we serve global manufacturers from Sanofi to Danaher to Hitachi, and effectively, it's really with the same vision that we've always had, which is, how do you provide a clear understanding of what's actually happening, which is a pretty big challenge, and I can get into that later. And then once with this information, how do you provide it in a way where they can actually take actions to improve? And the gold standard for application of modern
all right, this is really important. This is MES. This is OEE. This is not, if you just look at what he's focusing on, it's not actually Industry 4.0, but I'll put it back right here. Put it back a little bit.
Manufacturers from Sanofi to Danaher,
listen to this again,
to Hitachi, and effectively it's really with the same vision that we've always had, which is how do you provide a clear understanding of what's actually happening, which is a pretty big challenge, and I can get into that later. And then once with this information, how do you provide it in a way where they can actually take actions to improve? And the gold standard for application of modern technology in my mind is Waze or Google traffic. So you think about how this technology basically cuts to the chase. It doesn't dominate your attention. It doesn't, drown you in dashboards and, constantly needing to, you to look at it or interact with it. On occasion, it provides guidance. If you listen to that guidance, you will perform at a much higher level. So that is the gold standard. We're not quite there in manufacturing yet, where there is a place for dashboards and.
So what he's talking about, what Martin's talking about here is it's really user interface design, being able to present operators with not overwhelming information, but just the insights that they need, providing them with a dashboard. We've seen this many times where we put an MES and OEE system in for a production line, and just by virtue of giving the operators a high level display of their availability, quality, and performance and their overall OEE number, they can improve their OEE by 10 to 20% just by virtue of giving them the number and by looking at it. And to Martin's point, if they have this complicated spreadsheet or complicated, Azure AI dashboard or whatever, the operators aren't going to use it. So Martin hits the nail on the head that in order to drive value for the operators, you need to make it super easy for them. But he's kind of missing the whole point about enterprise integration and unlocking that data that Raven.AI will calculate and integrating it through the rest of your enterprise. So we believe that the gold standard for Industry 4.0 is achieving the manufacturing holy grail, which is a fully integrated business made up of digital factories, which we talk about all the time on our channel. You can watch this video here. Let's get back into what he's talking about right now.
And other than reports, but really that is the value that technology can provide, which is to help to identify problems and make it easier to solve them more quickly.
Yeah, and just to clarify for listeners, when you said Waze, you're referring to the app, right?
That's right.
Traffic app where the input comes from both, real data, but then also, traffic data, but also the input that people are physically providing by typing into the app, right?
Absolutely. And now the way that it works is it gets data from your car and from traffic. People contribute data, but one of the core things is that data needs to be accurate. Mm-hmm. If that data is not accurate, no matter what you do on top of that inaccurate data, you won't be able to provide good guidance. One of the biggest challenges today is that, in the Industry 4.0 space, or in manufacturing today, there's tons of companies out there providing analytics, maintenance software. Now,
Very true.
These systems rely on the data that's fed into them. And this data is, has been collected from machines for decades. But the most valuable data is to understand when the process is not running. When the process is not running, the way to get it is typically through manually entered methods.
And manually entered methods, you'll find out that those are not very reliable. The operators fudge it, they don't enter it, you're not capturing small stops. You need to, and I think this is the where Raven.AI really has hit the nail on the head, is you actually look at their product. They have looks like a kind of a turnkey edge device that will collect data, transmit that data to the Raven.AI cloud, and then send the numbers back down to this display, making it easily available to the operator. So they can get a quick time to value. But as far as what I'm seeing on the website, it's not really clear to me how I would, as a manufacturer, unlock this data and make it available to my other business applications, such as my ERP system, such as my machine learning and AI initiatives, et cetera, et cetera. So that, and that's really what Industry 4.0 is all about. It's about building a fully integrated business made up of digital factories, not just one production line that, increases efficiency, but how can you increase efficiency from the enterprise as a whole. But let's go on.
Either somebody writes it down, types it in Excel, or pulls a drop-down menu. So all of these systems sit on this rickety structure where humans are entering data into the system, and the fact that they're all sitting on top of this means that data quality is one of the biggest issues that has people haven't emphasized. So half of the problem with many of these systems is data quality, and the fact that these other systems with analytics and dashboards are sitting on top of this poor data quality. People get burned. People get burned by getting pointed in the wrong direction. And what happens when you get burned a few times? You get disengaged. So you have these systems that exist to present metrics that people don't trust on the shop floor. And then at the core, people are going back to doing what they've been doing for 30 years, which is managing their day-to-day based on instincts. So to solve the Industry 4.0 challenge, you need to make sure that it's sitting on a foundation of good data.
That's true. That part is true. And that foundation of good data is the unified namespace, which I really wanted to highlight in this reaction video.
And then once people have confidence that the data is trustworthy, how do you give them a tool to allow them to take actions to identify and solve those problems more quickly?
Yeah. So you really are bringing together kind of the best of both worlds there. Like, what are some ways that, just to try to make it tangible for listeners here, what are some ways that, your tool, Raven.AI, harmonizes the best of, the data being collected from machines and the human input?
Well, at the core, I think what makes it really clear is that our clients work with us because they get a return on their investment. So there is a cost. Our technology costs a certain amount, so they need to see that return. So, and what delivers that return changes based on where they are in their evolution. So an example, we serve a Danaher plant in California, large organization. And as I mentioned before, one of the biggest challenges is to know what's happened. So this particular plant had an issue where machines that were producing goods were down for a long period of time for unknown reasons. And if you were to look at the machine data, it would highlight the fact that they are down because they're broken. So, at a high level, the machines are broken. What do you do to address broken machines? Well, maybe you get engineers to try to make the machines run more smoothly, right? But what we saw when we deployed our technology was that when a machine breaks and goes down, there's actually 3 different segments of time. So there's the first segment of time where you're waiting for maintenance to arrive. The second one, you're fixing the machine. And the third one, you're waiting for the operator to come back. So those 3 different segments of time require different things to resolve. So when we finally sliced it up and showed them, it was shocking to see that they were losing 600 machine hours per month because of waiting for maintenance. And this is not that they didn't have maintenance staff, or it was just a slight misalignment of their schedule. So one of the amazing things is that the first time you see data presented accurately, the types of things that you need to do to drive gains early on are often mundane. And so in this case here, they reduced their waiting for maintenance downtime by 90%, resulting in significant OEE gains. And if you were to see what they're actually doing on the shop floor, it is not revolutionary. It just comes this is the kind of thing where if you were to define this problem and give operators, this is the problem, this is your team, we're spending too much time waiting for maintenance. They know how to solve this problem, right? All you need to do is and we don't solve problems. We just present them to people who know how to solve them on the shop floor. So one of the exciting.
So I just wanted to draw out this little box here. To my understanding, this is how the Raven system works. And I am actually getting a demo of it this week, so I'll be able to comment in more detail how it works and how it will work in the future. But as far as I understand, this is their Raven.AI box. It has, an edge device. They did try to do it cloud only initially, but they found out that it was much better to have a device that they could deploy, integrate quickly, and then also provide visuals. And you'll see that on their website, like here. If you zoom in here, you'll see it says Raven right there. So this is my understanding of how the technology works. And if I'm incorrect or if it changes, then I'll update this video. But they'll put in this box, and this is the Raven, and then it collects data from your machines here. This is your production line, sends it to the Raven.AI cloud, and then it sends the result set back down to this box, and then makes it visible. And also, this operator over here could then, maybe potentially, look at a screen from the Raven.AI cloud, for example, right? They could do this from outside their plant. And this is valuable. I mean, this is definitely something that would provide value to a manufacturer very quickly. But the reason why I'm making this video is because ultimately what I would like to see is I want to see that this device right here can support IIoT. What does that mean? It means that it's edge driven, it's report by exception, it's lightweight, and it's open architecture. So meaning this Raven.AI cloud does not become a data silo. This Raven.AI box does not become a data silo, right? If it does not publish its information, report by exception, edge driven, in a lightweight format like MQTT, and it's open architecture, then I would be so bold as to say that this is not an Industry 4.0 solution. But again, I'm meeting with the guys this week, so I do know that they have been able to make that data accessible. They're not trying to hold your data hostage, but out of the box, this is what it seems like. This is their standard deployment. It's kind of an island of automation. It's an island of MES. It provides value immediately, and that's why their customers buy it. But the reason, again, why I'm making this video is what I'd like to eventually see is have this Raven.AI solution just simply be like, just do this just to make it simpler. Raven.AI cloud becomes a node in the IIoT ecosystem. So Raven.AI could not only publish data to our MQTT broker, but it could also subscribe to it. And it could also, so it could subscribe to the data from our lines. The beauty of that is if I drop in another line, right? If I drop in another line here and I publish this line data to my IoT ecosystem, boom, now Raven.AI could immediately subscribe to that data, run its OEE efficiency calculations, and publish it back to our infrastructure. So that's kind of why I'm doing this, and the whole reason why I'm taking the time to make this reaction video.
Exciting things is that, often the kinds of things we see early on are, you're spending too much time waiting for maintenance. You're spending 3 times as much time as you should on setup. Your machine stops and starts way too often. So there's tons of early gains as soon as you, I guess in some ways, just flick on the lights for the first time.
No, that's a really good example. It's the data alone doesn't tell enough of the story, without the human input, right? And interpretation of what it actually means.
Absolutely. And I think at some point here, you'll notice that I never use the word OEE or all these other metrics here, because at some point the problem was they are spending too much time waiting for maintenance.
Yeah.
So let's eliminate that problem. And there's so much talk, the conversation about Industry 4.0 and, IIoT and AI, cloud, and all this kind of stuff here. It's so far removed from, supervisors and maintenance leaders having a conversation about what kinds of things they can do together to reduce how much time they're spending waiting for maintenance. So in some ways, the most effective Industry 4.0 projects right now aren't called
They're not projects, but
Industry 4.0 projects. They're called continuous improvement projects, or not.
They're called digital transformations.
Not even projects. It's just part of continuous improvements.
This is the part I really disagree with, because if Industry 4.0 was the continuous improvement, then it would be the fourth industrial evolution. It would be an evolution, a continuous improvement. The whole reason why it's called Industry 4.0 is because it's a revolution. It allows you to continuously improve even while you're sleeping, because you created an ecosystem that allows you to leverage machine learning and AI. But until you actually have this ecosystem, watch why your IIoT strategy will fail video. You're sending data you're sending data from the edge straight to the cloud. Maybe it's a Raven.AI cloud, but you're sending data to a data lake in a cloud, but you're not actually building an IIoT infrastructure. This becomes the central nervous system for your business. This is what makes your business become self-aware and become intelligent. So that's really important thing to note, because otherwise you're just building another island of automation. Now, it's true that there are a lot of people out there that claim they're IIoT or they claim that they're Industry 4.0. They don't actually know what it means. They think it's a buzzword. They haven't explained what the goal is like we have. So that's why there's a lot of misinformation in the market. And so if Martin's talking about the misinformation in the market, he's absolutely right. But if he's taken any time to watch our channel, he would understand that This is what manufacturers want. This is the manufacturing holy grail. Fully integrated business made up of digital factories.
So for that particular example, like in none of our communication were we mentioning smart manufacturing, Industry 4.0, cloud. That wasn't there. Like Danaher has continuous improvement baked into their culture. They are looking for practical ways to drive gains. And we're happy to be a tool in their toolkit to support them to make these gains. And that's
you don't want to be, well, you're a tool in the toolkit, but more importantly, you're a node in the ecosystem. Remember that. IIoT is about building an ecosystem where all nodes are publishers and consumers of data. All of your people, your hardware, and your software and your equipment is all connected into an IIoT infrastructure. That's what Industry 4.0 is. It's not just continuous improvement.
Effectively what Industry 4.0 is. It's not a movement. It's not this big transformation.
It is a movement.
From one way to another. It is a pretty neat tool in the toolkit, but that's not the narrative that's presented, on social media, not on LinkedIn and all that, or even in boardrooms from, large manufacturers.
In another one of your articles on LinkedIn, Martin, you referenced a Deloitte study that showed how labor productivity in manufacturing had been growing very consistently and rapidly from like the late 1960s until 2007 or so. And then since then, despite turning on what you referred to as the real-time data fire hose, that productivity has stagnated. And it was surprising for me to see this. I'm curious if you could talk about why that has happened.
Yeah, it was pretty shocking to see. It was by Deloitte and MAPI, an organization, a manufacturing organization, doing a study of labor productivity. And it's almost like the moment the iPhone was released, productivity growth basically flatlined. But really the thing that changed was this appetite for real-time data. So up until that point, we've always had data. In manufacturing in particular, data is just a fundamental part of our lives. But the way we consumed it was in a manageable amount. We would see performance, once a shift. As mentioned before, we would spend our time walking around. So, you'd see your daily shift report, you'd internalize the problem that you're trying to solve, and you go and try and solve it. So what, as technology advanced with the cloud and IoT and access to all this data, the way that we implemented, solutions very much, sort of copied our KPI report-centric view of, how to drive improvement. So, rather than changing how we perceive how we should use data, we simply took a report that we used to see once a shift and just made it live. So
that's a very important point. Enabling the access to the data in real time. Stakeholders know the state of the business in real time. Stakeholders know the future state of the business in real time.
So the way, I would say the way we were used to using data is once a day you get a report. Now, when you flip to real time, if you make reports real time, there's a couple issues. One, often with the once a day reports, you have people getting in there to actually make adjustments so that the numbers are trustworthy. And the second one is our reports and KPIs typically.
I would argue that if you're making adjustments, you're making it less trustworthy. The data needs to come from the edge, and it's a representation of what actually happened.
They aren't an effective way to guide action. So, you go back to my Waze example. Waze is not a series of dashboards and KPIs. It's simple instructions that tell you how to avoid traffic. And I think that's a big difference here. So, whereas we have this technology that's able to collect and present tons and tons of data in real time, our capability to consume data is still quite low. So, how do you, and I think we've struggled with this change that has, impacted the two things that I mentioned earlier, which is data quality and engagement. Presenting a dashboard in real time that has questionable data that's not directive is not helping people on the shop floor take actions to drive improvement. So, but at the same time,
that is really important. That's really true. And that's, I think, where a Raven.AI, their specialty is being able to create these, dashboards in real time, do the automated data cleaning and real-time performance monitoring to unlock that on the plant floor. And, at the end of this, I'll do kind of a dissection at the end of this video of where I like to see Raven.AI going.
There's been this movement over the last 10 years to invest in technology. And there's been this, companies are investing massive amounts in pilots and different initiatives, often very, very large initiatives that are disruptive organizationally. So in many cases with these implementations, The most complex part isn't the technological part. It is change management. So by taking these systems, which just are fundamentally flawed and are not helping, you're actually disrupting organizations and creating disengagement on the shop floor.
Right. If you try to put in a Rockwell MES as a solution, an off-the-shelf solution, you're going to disrupt the operators. The goal is to provide no interference to everyone's current job. You're not trying to change anything they're doing. You're trying to augment it,
which does not help, nurture and improve a continuous improvement culture. So, if I were to think of the formula for manufacturers, big or small, if to deploy this technology properly, first you need to work on your continuous improvement culture, and this needs to happen before even thinking about investing in technology. Continuous improvement, once it's baked into our culture, then view technology as a tool in the toolkit, and every manufacturer should be looking for the right tool for the job.
They should be looking for the right tool for the job, but then they should also be making sure that that tool meets their minimum technical requirements. Report by exception, edge-driven, lightweight, open architecture. You don't want a bunch of tools. Imagine if you had all these tools laying around the plant, but you didn't have this. You would have to literally go, from this tool to that tool to that tool. You might have to connect this tool to that tool, like so. It becomes unmanageable. And people tried to do this. They tried to do this over the last 10 years. This is why Martin's saying your technology initiatives have failed. Yes, we know, but we found the solution. This is the solution right here. It's the solution that Tesla's doing, that everyone's like so dumbfounded of how they're crushing the market. This is why they're crushing the market. They're not holding on to 100 years of bad practices like other auto manufacturers are. That's hard to let go of. If you built your factories in the last 10 years, you're starting with a blank slate. It's not just continuous improvement, but it's also data openness. And a lot of these manufacturers that we're consulting with and doing, digital transformation maturity assessments with, they've got this guy and they've got this guy, and they're competing against each other. This guy's on the team red and this guy's on team blue. And we're like, this guy over here that's in charge of the MES initiative, and this guy's over here in charge of the SCADAV initiative, they don't want to share data. So it's like, how are you going to unlock innovation if there's no central source of truth for all of your data, information, and events?
And should be very, wary of tools that, if the team is rejecting your tool, there's probably a good reason for it. So the second thing is that often, because of the scale of how Industry 4.0 is presented online, everybody thinks they need to go big.
No, you don't need to go big. You start small and you scale. I don't know why he would think you need to go big.
Where the reality is that the best way to deploy this kind of technology is to deploy quick and small and manageable and accelerate and double down on success. And it's amazing to see on LinkedIn when anybody posts something that shows a whiteboard. So
I don't know. I like our whiteboard videos. So
somebody is really proud of their whiteboard and they say, "Hey, I made a KPI whiteboard. Check it out, LinkedIn."
Okay,
and then
he's talking
people
about an
jump
operator.
all over it. So there's the old school folks that say, "This is the way to go. It's so connected to the operator, it creates engagement. It's like it's perfect." And then there's the tech folk that go like, "No, what are you guys doing? You're stuck in the 70s or stuck in the 80s. That's not the way to do it." When the reality is they're both right. So one of the things that whiteboards do that technology often doesn't do is that it takes the operator and the production team along for the ride. So you start, it's white. There's nothing there. You come up with a concept. If the operators or anybody makes a suggestion, you can just take your whiteboard tape and draw something new. And there's this neat way to create engagement and involvement with the people who are actually using the technology. The operators, if they don't see value in it, if operators don't see value in these systems, you're off to a bad start. So like the way that operators benefit from technology, if the technology applies pressure to their leaders to fix their problems. So the great thing with whiteboards is it takes them along for the ride. Technology is likely a better way to implement the end state, but it misses that journey to get to that end state. So what we've seen with our clients is that you can get the best of both worlds by starting with an extremely simple and basic implementation and take the operators along for the ride as they're beginning to, request complexity.
The operators are the smartest people in your factory. They could solve all of your problems if the executives just listened to them.
So the first phase is what is happening. And in some ways you can even create, like if you're thinking of how to categorize time, if you categorize time in 9 different ways, let's just categorize time in 9 different ways and let the operators push for added complexity.
Now that part didn't make sense for me. Let's categorize it in one way. Categorize it the same way so we're comparing apples to apples. That's the whole point of OEE.
So once you know what's happening, then the next thing is, what has happened, what's happening. That's kind of like the basics.
Oh, I think he meant like, okay, let's start by categorizing downtime as just downtime. And then when we want to get more granular, then categorize the downtime in 9 different ways. I think that's what he meant.
And then the next phase is, why is it happening? And if you take operators along this journey, then your maintenance team and your supervisors and plant managers are along for the journey. And that's how you actually integrate technology into your continuous improvement culture. By coming in with this end state, which may look the same, and saying, implement this now, you've missed that part that actually, creates that connection and glue between technology and continuous improvement culture. And without that connection, it just doesn't fit.
It's all really, really good stuff there. Well, Martin, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to add to this conversation before we put a wrap on it?
No, I think we covered it all here. And yeah, it's an exciting time in manufacturing. I think over the last year, with all the turmoil and change brought on by COVID, manufacturers are talking about digital transformation in Industry 4.0 more than ever. I think there's a lot of talk, a lot of concern. There isn't a lot of practical guidance for manufacturers showing them how to actually take action here. So I think if I were to sort of sum it up to one thing here, to start off with Industry 4.0 for any size manufacturer, the best approach is to start quickly, start small, start simply. And with that foundation, and this is with your operators, and with that foundation, double down on success and accelerate. If you start too big and you start from the top down, it's just going to be on the scrap heap of failed Industry 4.0 projects and kind of continue the pilot purgatory that's been going around for a while now. So I would also say that there's a huge appetite for this technology. It hasn't necessarily, the solution hasn't been articulated in a way that's resonating with plant managers, but in the same way where there's an Uber moment where people would never jump into a car with a stranger to saying like, actually, it's okay, I'm going to jump in a car with a stranger because they just got that value prop just right. There's going to be that Uber moment in manufacturing where manufacturers recognize that this is the way that they need to run their operations to actually keep up. This is the way to do it, twice as efficient and spend half the amount of money. So there's that Uber moment coming when people are going to realize, and because of how simply this technology can be deployed nowadays, it's going to go quickly. So it's exciting to kind of see that coming. I'm not sure exactly what's going to trigger that moment, but it's definitely conversations like this where we're talking about practical applications of Industry 4.0 are going to help us get closer to that. And it's definitely exciting to be in this space at this time.
Martin, great conversation today. This was really valuable. I think we're going to have this will be a very popular episode. So I really appreciate you doing this. Can you give our audience a sense for how to get in touch with you and where they can learn more about Raven?
Yeah, so the main way to get in touch with me is on LinkedIn and now on Clubhouse. You got to check us out on Clubhouse, Industry 4.0 on Clubhouse. It's going to be pretty awesome.
Beautiful. And then Raven.AI is the URL for your software. So
that's right.
All right. Well, fantastic. Martin, thanks again for taking the time to join me today. Really appreciate it. And then for the rest of you, I hope to catch you on the next episode of The Manufacturing Executive.
All right, guys, I'm going to react to this here. Let me just turn this down.
You've been listening.
All right, so that was pretty good. Okay, it was definitely a little easier to listen to the second time than the first time. The first time, I think I got a little subconsciously triggered by that whiteboard comment. It does appear that it was nothing to do with our videos. Martin, if you haven't checked out our videos, I'll leave a link to the What is IIoT video here. And yeah, I'm excited to look forward to our meeting this week and learning more about Raven.AI. Thank you for letting me react to this. I hope no one got offended. If you did, I'm not sorry, because Industry 4.0, a lot of people don't get it. And one of the things is that Walker, he'll say in board meetings, forget everything you know about SCADA, MES, OEE, Industry 4.0, and IIoT. Just forget everything and start from a fresh understanding. Go through our IIoT mini course. We're actually, we've crossed 2,000 members in there, and we've crossed 1,200 members in our Industry 4.0 community Discord server. I'm gonna be excited to join the Industry 4.0 Clubhouse. That's really awesome, Martin, that you've been doing that. More conversations and more information being shared, the better. And yeah, thanks for watching.